Full Contact. In association with Mitsubishi Motors, drive your ambition.
Hello and welcome to Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph and Mitsubishi Motors. We're underway for the inaugural Autumn Nations Cup, where there were wins for England, Scotland and Ireland, another defeat for Wales and their head coach Wayne Pivac. England were making their first appearance at Twickenham since March, and despite impressing, they barely needed to get out second gear, or at least seemed that way, to put away a disappointing Georgia side. We'll reflect on England's game and look ahead to the weekend's clash with Ireland with one of England's try scorers from the weekend, Elliot Daly. As for Ireland, they ran out comfortable winners over an out-of-sorts Wales side. Now 6 defeats in a row for the Welsh under Wayne Pivac, who has only 2 wins since he was named as a replacement for Warren Gatland. We'll be discussing where the Welsh need to go from here, and my goodness, could you imagine this, if it makes sense to replace Pivac already? Well, what a week it's been for fans of Scottish sport. After securing qualification to Euro 2020 during the week, Greg Townsend's side made it 5 wins in a row by coming from behind to beat Italy in Florence. Fly half Adam Hastings missed the game with an injury, but he's been very much to the forefront of Scotland's recent form, and we'll be speaking to him to find out what has actually clicked under Gregor Townsend and whether him and Finn Russell can work together, and if he's confident with Scotland making 6 wins in a row this weekend against France. Ahead of the draw for the Women's World Cup this week, we'll be speaking to England and Harlequins centre Rachel Burford to about the draw itself and about another convincing win for the Red Roses at the weekend, which saw them move to the number 1 in the world rankings. And, as ever, we'll also be answering your questions, and we'll take a closer look at some of the work being done at grassroots level during the last 7 months as part of the Mitsubishi Motors Volunteer Recognition Programme. And alongside me today, chat all this through, is the former England centre Tom May. Hello, Tom.
Hi, how are we doing?
Now, I understand you've just got back from Italy, you were covering the game. You told me things are a bit different there in terms of how they are policing things.
Well, we complain about lockdown here, but lockdown is certainly very different over there. 3 different grades, yellow, orange and red. I was in orange in Florence when I first arrived. By the time I left, it was red. You're not allowed to leave your house. There's armed forces wandering about, asking where you're going. It's certainly more stringently policed than the one here.
Mm-hmm. Well, England's, it was a comfortable win. And actually, I'm not saying, I thought England were trying to make a point. I mean, they've had Georgia as opponents in training and so on, and they got roughed up in the World Cup final. And I thought they just said, right, this is a chance to prove to Georgia and the rest of the world that actually, up front we are solid, and you're not going to do that to us. And it seemed to be quite plain when they kept taking the scrum as an option early on, that they weren't that interested in playing a much more expansive game. They were going to do that job.
Look, I think the conditions were difficult and got worse.
Well, that's another thing, isn't it? Yeah.
And you can only play to the I guess the conditions, and they did get very, very bad during that second half. But I think you're right. There is a certain element of a big statement being told early on in these games when Eddie Jones comes up against these sides that have perceived strengths. Right, we'll try and match you. Toe to toe for that, and they took on the Georgians right where the Georgians are or would fancy their strengths to be.
Well, we've got Elliot Daly coming on in a moment, so we can ask him a lot of things to do with this. But I tell you one thing that's been made clear with me: the games are obviously much better in front of crowds, for players, for commentators, for viewers, for everything. But I tell you what, it does do. It shows which parts of the game drag and which don't, doesn't it?
Yeah, and
if you've not got a compensating atmosphere around you.
No, I know it highlights the I guess the elements that need work on within the game, and we're trying to develop it as a spectacle all the time, aren't we? And trying to look at ways that we can speed it up and make it more engaging. And there's clearly issues in and around the scrum still.
Yeah.
It takes far too long to get the ball back in play. So, but they're certainly highlighted when there's no fans.
Mm-hmm. Jack Willis, Ollie Lawrence made their debuts. How did you assess them? Do you think they'll feature against Ireland?
Yeah, look, I think Jack Willis he's been knocking on the door for a long time, hasn't he? Who was it? South Africa. He was probably going to come up against, apart from for injury. And I think his performances in the latter stages of the Premiership were outstanding. I think the problem for him is the strength and depth that there are in and around those positions.
Yeah,
good
problem to have, actually, for Jones in England.
Yeah, 100%, and that's exactly where the squad want to be. They want to have 2 or 3, I would think, in each position, and fellas that can interchange in between positions. I think that's also very important. And you look at Elliot Daly, who we're going to speak to in a minute. He sort of epitomises that fullback, wing, outside centre, gives real options to what Eddie Jones can do.
Mm-hmm. They've got Ireland this weekend. Ireland are going to have a couple of players out, Sexton and Henshaw. I mean, they're big players.
They are, and Billy Burns, looks to be struggling with a head injury. Do they go with Conor Murray as a 10 option? That's something that's been discussed. Listen, if they do,
I'm very reluctant to do that. He's such a specialist. I know the French have, the French have done it. That shows it's not a good idea. But they're not interchangeable for me.
No, I think, especially at that level, I think you can probably get away with it at club or regional level. But against a side that's not a side you want to be coming up against in England and having to change your pivotal position. I think it's going to be a really tough afternoon for the Irish. Actually, I think from where they had been and have been to where they are now is a very big distance. Well,
the other thing is, I mean, it wasn't as bad over the weekend, but again, their line out, tottered a bit, and they've usually been completely secure on every bit of their set phase play. And England are not a sort of side you want to come up against if you're foundering there, because one thing England are good at, they're good at focusing on particular points, maybe over focusing sometimes, but if they get that part of the game as to be one to attack, and they do go for you, they can cause a lot of problems.
Yeah, I think, look, the scoreline was 32-9, wasn't it, against Wales? I was struggling to watch that at points. It was a poor game, and I'm not sure that the Irish would be that impressed with the way that they performed. Yes, okay, that it's a win and it's a comfortable win in the end, but I think that's more of a reflection of where Wales are actually.
Well, let's go on to talk about that. What do you? I mean, I'm not one for saying sack managers, coaches, directors quickly, because you've got to give them time. I think the most distressing thing, if you're a Welsh fan, I've been speaking to quite a few of them, is that they can't see what they're trying to do. I was saying, they don't seem to know what to do with front football, and they certainly haven't got a clue. It's very difficult to do anything with back football as well. So I'm just I'll ask you: did you think? Can you define what sort of pattern they're trying to play?
No, that's the short answer. But I also think that there's an element of time that needs to be given to new coaches that come in, and that historically they've had one of the best coaches that we've seen for a number of years in Warren Gatland. And you change that and change all of the systems around that. It's going to take some time. Well, the other thing is, I mean, you've got this has gone under the radar a bit because of Pivac and Gatland, but Sean Edwards has left. I mean, Sean Edwards is there almost as long as Gatland, so and arguably more valuable to that team than probably Gatland, I would think, in terms of the emphasis that he would have had on that team.
Yeah.
And poor old Byron Hayward has come into a job where, how you can then replicate the levels of standard that you've seen from a defensive system or is expected from a defensive system is very difficult. And he's disappeared out the back door already. Yeah, well, I mean, if the thing is, that's not going to help them in their quest for stability, is it? No, and before you, I would have thought, before you try to get some form of pattern established within a squad, you should at least have your management systems nailed down, because otherwise they're both fluid, and that can't be good. Well, your default systems need to be there, don't they? And right, this is what we're going to do in this part of the game, and this is the basis of our attack. Then you can adjust elements of it. If you go in and make what seem to be like big changes because of there is no clear way that team is trying to play, you can come unstuck, especially at the international level.
I mean, what do you make of this? I mean, Sean Edwards was quite clear about this. He said he didn't get a long enough contract offer. And people were saying, well, he wanted 4 years. And I was thinking, well, it's different when you've not done anything. Well, not if you've not been proven in that job, even though you've got a CV which is good enough, than when you've been there a long time and you've certainly proved that your input has been valuable. I think that's in a different category. And why you wouldn't give that? The people are saying, well, you can't give it a longer contract than Pivac. Well, why not?
Well, also, surely you're working on World Cup cycles.
I would have thought so, yeah.
So what's the point in having anything less? Because it just brings you to a point where you're going to have to potentially make change a lot closer to the point in time when you don't want to be making that change.
Sam Warburton, he was talking about the next game as being a win no matter what. Is it that serious now, do you think? I
think so, just for the level of confidence within the players. They need to go, right, we can win as a team. I worked on that game in the World Cup, actually, when they played against the Georgians. And they're a bit of a pest as a team. Like they don't lie down.
Well, that's why I was trying to, wrote an article about this for Telegraph, and I was trying to get over the point that because England did such a comprehensive job, don't think that Georgia are a pushover, because they're not.
No.
And they've shown they can be awkward. I mean, they haven't got the fluidity and so on. Not even near the Italians at the moment, but they are not easy to subjugate. And England did. That was a mark of England's job. It was a bit like the Masters, so dominant that it made it not a contest.
Well, I think also there's a danger, isn't there, when you come up against sides that are in that second tier. Oh, we should smash these by 60, 70. That doesn't happen anymore. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
There is an element of the more senior team is sucked down a peg or two, but also it's a real opportunity for those tier 2 nations to have a crack at one of the big boys in world rugby. And I think Georgia will see this as an opportunity this weekend. Okay, last weekend they got nilled at Twickenham. They probably would have thought that they were never going to come out of that with flying colours. This weekend, I think they probably fancy their chances of providing an upset, given where Wales are. Given the fact that it's not going to be played in the Principality Stadium with loads of mental Welsh fans going nuts in Cardiff, here is their prime opportunity to do a job.
And God knows what the weather will be like. I mean, it was like the last time. And this is something I think that it came up on my Twitter feed. People are asking for broadcasters to put weather conditions in. Now, I'm not sure how you can do that because, you can have prevailing winds and so on, but as a kicker in a stadium, I know as a thrower in a stadium, it goes in one direction and the other. You talk to Adam Hastings at Murrayfield, they have separate wind tunnels.
Yeah. Case in point, Newcastle.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never been to a windier place. And
No.
That was, I guess, back in the day when Wilco was up there, his understanding of how wind moves around a stadium. But, look back to that Scotland-Wales game a couple of weeks ago. It was all over the shop, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So I guess from that perspective, Wales will be thinking, let's please not have conditions like that again, because it will probably allow the Georgians to gain.
Well, it'll lower the common denominator, won't it?
Exactly. I'll be really interested to see how that game pans out.
Really, very pleased to say we've got one of England's star players to join us for this podcast. It's Elliot Daly, England's utility back, but presently majoring at fullback. Hello, Elliot.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, not bad. Look, first game back at Twickenham since March. Strange circumstances. What was it like?
Yeah, it was very different to a usual Twickenham day, but I think we knew that we just wanted to go out there and try and make England proud in such a tough time. So hopefully we did that, and looking forward to the next couple of games coming up now.
How much have you delved into the World Cup defeat? Because they're not easy to come back from. And the expectation beforehand, rightly, I think, was huge. The disappointment must have been the same. What have you taken, if anything, out of that loss that you're trying to bring forward?
I think we spoke about it probably before the Six Nations, at the start of the Six Nations back in sort of early January, February time, and just spoke about how well we did to get to that situation, and obviously it didn't go the way we wanted, but I think as a group we played some really good rugby in that tournament, and obviously we didn't come away with what we wanted, but there's a lot of positives to take on board. So we just went to attack the Six Nations, and I think it was a credit to everyone involved, staff and coaches and players as well, to get, after losing the World Cup final, to come back and get Six Nations trophy was a brilliant achievement, really.
I think it was a little unfair the way that it turned out in the Six Nations, because, France played a great last game. Italy wasn't the greatest of games for England, and yet if you'd have carried on from where you were before the lockdown, England was starting to come very good, and we're looking much the better sort of side. When you went to the Georgia game, I thought it was just making a point and saying, look, this is what we need to do against this sort of side. Was that the case, or was it very much dictated by the weather?
No, we talked about all week about how prolific they are when it comes to scrum time and set piece. So we wanted to go at them in those areas. And I thought we did that, especially in the first sort of 10, 15, 20 minutes. We really ground them down. And then, in the second half, conditions weren't the best, but we just stuck to our game plan and what worked well for us in the first half. And to be fair, Georgia, they defended pretty well. Obviously, we probably left a few points out there, but I think the way we went about the win was exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted to be approach it like a normal test match, like we would do with any team, and that's what we did, and came away with the victory.
And 40-0, Elliot, in a test match is, that's a brilliant win. Is it frustrating that people expect you to, rack up a cricket score against sides like this, when actually it takes a lot more to break them down than people expect?
Yeah, at the end of the day, you go into the game, they're an international team. I think they're ranked 12th in the world. We went into the game no different to any other game, no different to this weekend's game. So we went in with the mindset of breaking them down, and we did that. And to come away 40-0 was a brilliant result for us. Obviously, as I said, we left some points out there, but to score 6 tries and not concede on was a brilliant outcome from the game.
And Eddie Jones is not afraid to bring in young, upcoming talent. There's a few new faces in the England camp right now. Who's impressed you most during training?
I think a lot of them, really. I think the way that the boys come in now, I think we try and make an environment where they can come in and express themselves, and I think they're very happy to do that. Obviously, Jack Willis getting his first start and first cap at the weekend. He's been on the fringes for a while now, and obviously coming back from a serious injury, he's done really well to get back to playing some of his best rugby. I think the likes of sort of Ollie Lawrence and Max Malins and people like that who are getting their first caps now in the squad. It's just exciting when we go out to train, and everyone, the competition in training is really high at the moment.
Elliot, this is one thing that I wanted to ask you. It was born out of the Argentina victory against New Zealand. The traditional vernacular wisdom is that you need a certain amount of game time before you can get into clicking. And yet they managed to pull that performance with a 13 months not having a game. So how much can you actually achieve in camp that's game related? And do you actually need those series of games?
I think you can get a lot out of camp. I think the way we train is over game intensity. So when we do go into a game, we're used to sort of being under that pressure and that fatigue. And I think the way we train, we just want to try and push ourselves as much as possible. And you do get a lot out of that. I think you do get a lot playing games, but as you said, I think with 13 months out of rugby for them, I think it was one of those things that there was a massive build up to that game. And we're lucky here to have trained with each other for the last sort of 3, 4, 5 weeks, and hopefully we can get some of our best stuff out at the end of this tournament.
On a personal note, you've committed to Saracens early in the summer with a number of other players. There are going to be dips in the quality of your opponents, week to week. Will that be beneficial, or will it be a challenge?
Are you talking about in the championship? Sorry?
Yes.
Yeah. I think, at the moment, it's not something I'm thinking about at the moment, just because one thing hasn't really been nailed down yet, and secondly, we're in England camp until sort of mid-December. So at the moment, it's not something that's in the forefront of my mind. I think obviously when we finish this tournament, hopefully finish it well, go back to club, and then start thinking about the next sort of 2-3 months before the Six Nations starts again. How to get myself in the best possible shape for Sarries and hopefully help them, but then also get back here and start playing well for England again.
Just ahead of your game against Ireland this weekend, they look like they've lost a couple of key individuals within their team. Do you think that makes them any less of a threat?
No, definitely not. I think the way that the squad they have, the players they have, I think the way that you can see they're such a well-drilled and well-trained team. I think everyone kind of knows their role within the team. And you see sort of the likes of James Lowe coming into there, adding a bit of quality to their back line. It's not going to be too different, I don't think. Definitely not. We're not thinking that it's going to be easier. Definitely not. I think the quality they've got in their squad all around the board is pretty good.
That is undoubtedly the case. But when they're down to the third choice 10, will that be something that you look at to think, well, maybe actually no matter what they do there, they're not going to have a familiar defensive system, and certainly under the acutest pressure, if we can get quick ball, that'll be a channel to look to go down.
Maybe. I think these things always happen when they're in the game. You can talk about it before the game, but until you get into the game and see what's going on, then we'll make plans accordingly. I think we'll talk about obviously all the options, but we won't know the team until the day before anyway. So you've got to just approach it as you would approach playing Ireland any other time, and then whoever they pick, whoever plays, then you can make plans around that.
Elliot, that's good of you to speak to us. Good luck over the next few weeks, and let's make sure that England come away with a winning place.
Cheers, thanks very much.
When we're talking about the Irish, they had a while ago a succession of people who they nominated. CJ Stander and so on was one of them, amongst others, to take the ball forward. Now, I'm not sure now who and what their go-to forwards are. Ryan takes the ball a bit forward, but he's not a bullocking forward. He's dynamic. Healy, when he's fit and so on, is one. I'm not sure if they've got as many carriers as they need.
No, and then you look at a side like the Italians, for example. They have got big ball carriers now in their back row, all of them, and I think you need that. And there's an element that Caelan Doris is a fantastic player. I saw him play in the under-20s a couple of years ago, and but he's a different type of back rower to someone like CJ Stander. And I think there's always an element in a team where you need that player that if it's all breaking down around you, you go, right, just give it to him and he'll get you on the front foot. If you don't have those sprinkled across your attacking options, you're in danger of getting thumped on the gain line, and then we know what it's like at the breakdown. It's impossible to get that ball out quickly if you're not on the front foot. So I think that's potentially an area that Ireland have to address, and the fact that Robbie Henshaw is out this weekend is really big for them, because he is a focal point in the backs, and I'm a big believer in the fact that you do need two pairs of eyes, so you do need two ball carriers, but you also two ball players, but you also need a big ball carrier, and that is the Irish point of penetration coming from Henshaw, and if he's not there, I'm not quite sure where it's going to come from. Well,
the Leinster's Kiwi-born winger James Lowe impressed. Alongside him, Gibson Park and Billy Burns make it the three project players. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, because the World Cup Rugby recently, they delayed the motion to extend the residency rule from 3 to 5 years, and teams will now have until the 31st of December 2021 to register their project players.
Yeah, look, I don't like the term, to be honest.
No, I don't either.
And I think Scotland have got a few as well, haven't they, in WP Nel? I think Willem van der Walt qualifies today for Scotland. But that said, James Lowe is a brilliant player. So if you can use those rules to get him into your side, then why not? I think.
I just don't understand why. I presume it's through COVID they've done this, but I always said that the residency rule should be 4 years or more, because that stopped World Cup hopping.
Yeah.
You could think, I don't make it for this time, therefore if I go next time, I can within 3 years I'll make a World Cup. And I've always thought if you did it 4 years, then they have to commit outside of World Cup, and that's a much more of a, of my heart is here and I'll take that chance, rather than actually I've just missed out where I am, naturally resident.
I think where it really stands out is when you've been in a squad,
yes,
and suddenly you appear somewhere else within months.
Yes,
and the fact that you haven't, been capped is your sort of only saving grace.
Yes,
and I think we've seen that a few times recently.
Yeah.
So as long as that's not happening, and these guys at Jameson Gibson Park and James Lowe, they've been there for a long time, and I think they've contributed at a level that why not try and exploit those rulings if they can, the Irish.
Well, now time to speak to a special guest. My goodness, this makes me feel old in many ways. Adam Hastings, the Scottish fly half. Adam, hello, first of all. You missed the game against Italy because you went for surgery on a dislocated shoulder. How is that now?
Yeah, it's all good, thanks. I had surgery last Monday, so it's been 7 days now. Feels all right, to be fair, considering it's only 7 days post-op. I finally mastered the art of putting on a T-shirt with one arm, so that's good news. But yeah, all good, thanks.
How long do you reckon it will take until we will see you back to near action?
Look, they always give you a kind of ballpark figure, and depending on recovery and stuff like that between different people. But they've said 4 months. So obviously, being an optimist that I am, I'm hoping slightly less. You get an X-ray at 3 months, and they kind of see if the bones fused on to what they've done, and then from then on, it's just when you get your strength back. So I'm not that strong anyway, so I've not got that much to catch up on.
Well, Finn Russell also missed the game, and I was tempted to post a tweet and say, who is it playing at fly half? Is it Will Ferrell? Is it Art Garfunkel? Or is it Leo Sayer? None of which you won't remember them. You're too young. But Duncan Weir. I mean, I know it was all for a good cause, and 11k was raised. But what was the reaction to his new hairstyle?
I mean, to be fair, there's a few dodgy barnets kicking about. So
yes, there are.
He's not the worst by a long shot, but look, I think obviously it's for a good cause, and to be fair, I actually think he suits it. It's funny when he does it at training, when he kind of puts it back, it looks a bit Sideshow Bobby off The Simpsons. But yeah, no, we've given him a bit of stick, but all for a good cause, so all good.
Adam, you've got 5 wins in a row now, and Gregor Townsend said after the weekend's result that there's still a lot more to come from the team. What areas do you think that the side need to develop to really take your game on?
That's a tough one. I think, well, what we've seen at the weekend, especially against Italy, those kind of games where they're down and dirty, they're a bit of an arm wrestle. In the past, we'd have potentially lost those games, but you've seen that's where I think we've gotten better, is these tight games, especially against Wales the other week. These tight games where it's maybe not on to run as much. You've seen we can kind of control a game now and kind of put teams where we want them. We've got a lot of physical ball carriers now. Our forward packs, getting there especially well. There's just there's competition for places, and we feel as a squad we're really strong. It's probably just being consistent throughout that 80 minutes. It's kind of cliche one that a lot of teams chase, but I think for us, we're good in dribs and drabs a lot of the time. Whereas sometimes let teams off the hook with easy tries. So I think that's probably where we need to improve on. Well,
France are up next, and they pose a peculiar, a threat, especially around half back, and when they, the fact that they're quite capable of scoring from improbable situations. What do you think are the primary things that Gregory is going to be stressing as to how you go about beating them?
I think just more of the same of what we've been doing. Obviously, being accurate with the ball, and on turnovers, just trying to kill it as quickly as possible. So if we spell that, just jump straight on it, because we know how dangerous France can be from turnover. Probably around that kind of guard shield day, around the rucks, watching Dupont. That'll be a big threat of theirs. The wingers like sniffing around there as well. I think just bringing a lot of line speed to try and counteract, that dangerous backline that they've got as well.
And let's talk about your own year before the shoulder injury. You started 4 out of 5 games. How are you feeling about your levels of performance, and how is your relationship with Finn Russell? Because it's always very difficult, isn't it, as a player when you're maybe vying for one position. But I think there's certainly something to be said that you can actually both add to what Scotland are trying to do.
Yeah, look, obviously it was nice to kind of get a run of games in a Scotland shirt. As a starter, I'd obviously in the past been involved in the 23 and, got limited game time, obviously, because Finn was starting. I probably wasn't as much of an option anywhere else at that point. It was good to kind of get that run. I think, the relationship with me and Finn, I've had these questions quite a lot, but honestly, there's zero animosity there. I think people would like it if they found out we were going at each other in training and not getting along. I've heard stories, obviously, about Ronan O'Gara and Sexton, that's been kind of publicised as well. But it's honestly nothing like that. We get along well. We're pally with each other. Whoever's starting, the other one will offer their help. And it was actually nice to play together for once at 10-12. Against Georgia, albeit for 15 minutes. It was just good fun to throw the ball about against a tiring team. So. Look, obviously Finn's a quality player and he's great to learn off as well. I love picking his brain, especially. He's had a great couple of years out in France, and it's been good spending time with him again.
Do you think that dynamic of having 2 ball players in a team? I've just been talking about it with Brian, but with some of the other international teams, it certainly makes them more of an attacking threat when they've got 2 pairs of eyes, 2 guys that can spot the space. Yeah,
I think so, and especially. Almost kind of 2 10s in that role as well. You get ball playing 12s, but I think until you've played at 10, you kind of don't really see that side of the coin. So, I've obviously played at Glasgow a lot with Pete Horn, and he's a 10. He's played a lot at 10 as well. So he just kind of offers that extra pair of eyes. Obviously, Sam Johnson's very good at that role as well. But yeah, I think you've seen it with England, Ford Farrell, you've seen it with Australia as well. And then obviously All Blacks have kind of tried it with Bowden Barrett and Mwanga. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that can be brought to the table.
Question from a fan, Adam. Now you've cemented your place in international rugby, how does Gavin take to being called Adam's dad?
I'm not quite sure we're there yet. I'm glad you said that though. I'll let him know. But
I've got a question for you actually. Of you, Scott and Gav, who is longest off the tee?
Oh, me? Come on, you can't be
not at the moment.
My dad's nearly 60. Yeah,
yeah, but he always told me that was his forte. He said he was big off the tee.
To be honest, maybe back in the day, but not so much now. I played with him a bit during the lockdown, and his short game's pretty good. But that's the thing I'll hold myself credit for is out driving him.
Fair enough. Look, finally, how are you feeling in general about the next year or so, with the prospect of fans returning to games and so on? Because it's been a very atypical time. Can you tell me, from your perspective, just what are the biggest differences you found? What have you had to try and actively cope with that you found surprising?
It's a strange one, obviously, running out to an empty stadium. They're still playing the music and things like that. So there's similarities, but you're just never going to get the same atmosphere as when there's a crowd, especially with internationals, 70,000 people screaming. It's rather different, to be honest. And especially at the start when we're running out for club, I really struggle to get myself, really, really up for games. So it's just about, I think, creating your own atmosphere. Boys have spoken about, I think, seeing other teams do it. Italy at the weekend, they were extremely passionate. After every penalty, they were in Scotland's face celebrating and just getting around each other. I think that's the biggest thing. The biggest challenge for teams is going to be creating that atmosphere. But fingers crossed we can get fans in as soon as possible. I'm hoping they don't come back until I'm fit, because that'll make me even more jealous of the boys playing. But I think that's the target.
Adam, it's great to speak to you. Please say hello to your mum and dad for me, and the best of luck with not just the injury, but the career as we go into next year.
Thank you very much, guys. Yeah, appreciate it for having me on, and take care. Thank you.
Tom, talking about crowds, there's been a big difference when you're watching the Southern Hemisphere, hasn't there?
Oh.
You know, over the weekend. Well, where did that come from? Sydney, Argentina,
Unbelievable.
New Zealand, first time in the history, and actually not a fluke either.
No, and that was that's full-bore New Zealand as well. That's not with a side that's been changed a couple of times, like Australia beat last week.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable. I mean, I didn't get to see it. I was watching it. I don't know whether you watch it or you read it on social media, but either way, that was what I was doing, and I couldn't believe what was coming through. It's amazing. And then I tell you what I did see was how the Argentinians had managed to keep themselves going during lockdown. That piece about how each individual had been taking themselves to try and improve themselves as a player, whether it be skills or fitness.
I mean, the first game they played for 13 months.
That's ridiculous. I've noticed loads of people have been getting stuck into the South Africans who think they need between 600 and 800 minutes of rugby or something like that to get up to speed, or is it 400 and 600, whatever it is.
Well, I mean, that's traditional
Argentina.
wisdom, but it obviously shows that, you know, it isn't ubiquitous. It isn't, something that has to happen, because, I mean, the first time the All Blacks have had consecutive defeats since 2011, I mean, that's just how good they are. And of course, well, you've got to take it with a pinch of salt because it's a New Zealand Herald, which is, you know, a sort of lower version of the Sun. I've been calling for, heads already. I mean, Hansen has gone. It was never going to be easy, even with the All Blacks, especially with their expectations. But I mean, that's a ludicrous call, isn't it?
That's completely bonkers. Yeah. You know, they just have to have some understanding about how professional sport evolves, how teams evolve. There are always peaks and troughs, and any time you remove the leader of one team, there is going to be a period of vulnerability, and I think that's where they find themselves right now. But as a group of players, you can't really question them, can you?
Full Contact, in association with Mitsubishi Motors. Everyone's ambitions are different. You can climb to the top, or you could take on uphill battles of a different kind. You can explore for hundreds of miles, or you could begin a bigger journey. You can make time fly, or you could make it stand still. The Mitsubishi SUV range. Drive your ambition.
In partnership with England Rugby, Mitsubishi Motors run a volunteer recognition programme to provide the rugby community with opportunities to recognise and reward volunteers who are the heartbeat of the game. Now, throughout the autumn, in association with Mitsubishi, I will be chatting with a selection of rugby volunteers to hear their stories and shine a light on the brilliant work they've been doing during these most challenging of times. My guest for the fourth instalment is Jeremy Povey from Marlow RFC. Jeremy, I hear that during the pandemic, Marlow have been helping and offering its facilities to local NHS and emergency services. Can you tell us a bit more about this and how you were involved?
Yeah, certainly. Hi, Brian. So we've helped out in a number of ways, really. Offering a prescription service to, I think we've delivered over 1,000 prescriptions to around 500 residents of Marlow who are sort of in the vulnerable groups, save them having to go out the houses to get them. We've offered our facilities, our car park's being used for mobile testing quite recently, and we've also had teams of people go to 3 local surgeries to set up outside clinics so people can get routine things like blood tests and so on done from the insides of their cars, so obviously avoiding contact with the surgeries.
Jeremy, the variety of ways that you could have, as a club, have chosen to help in and around the current situation. What was yours and the club's reasons for choosing to support the NHS and emergency services in particular over other things?
Really, because that was where the greatest need seemed to be. We reached out, we made a decision fairly early on as a management committee that we wanted to help, and we put feelers out to various organisations, community groups to ask what help they needed, and the feedback from that was that it was the NHS and but.
Has this continued? How has it continued into the second lockdown?
So we're continuing to do mobile testing. The prescription service is ongoing as well. We're not doing the clinics anymore, but obviously the next thing we're expecting on the horizon is whether we're required to help with the vaccine rollout.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's been very difficult. I've been speaking to a lot of junior clubs and members and all, without exception, are finding it tough to keep hold of people, to volunteers and so on.
Yeah.
When you come out of the other side, when the game comes out of the other side of this, how are Marlow as a club going to be? What shape are you going to be in?
Well, we're pretty fortunate in that we have a very committed management team. I don't pretend it's not been difficult, and the constantly changing restrictions on both social and rugby activity mean constant replanning. But our senior squad and our junior sections, numbers of keeping buoyant. We actually got good numbers coming down to training. We did do before the second lockdown. And with the RFU's announcement that the leagues will be cancelled, we've begun a planning process to set up some local leagues within the Bucks area with the help of the constituent body to organise that so that we can actually deliver some kind of competitive rugby within this season. And it's all about keeping the boys informed, keeping the members informed, and giving them something to look forward to. Because actually a big part of why they come to the club is to keep contact with each other, keep involved with the club. And that goes for all the sections across the club, really.
Well, Jeremy, can I thank you for you and the club for the work you've been doing in and around the wider community. Good luck with the future. At least what you always have, because I used to train there with England, is a superb location and great facilities.
Absolutely. That's very kind of you, Brian. Thank you.
For more details of the Mitsubishi Motor Volunteers Recognition Programme with England Rugby, visit www.englandrugby.com/participation/volunteers/. Turning now to the women's game, very pleased to say we've got special guest on the line, Rachel Burford, the England and Harlequins Centre. I think Rachel is bringing her academy to my daughter's rugby club. My 12-year-old daughter, she's really excited, Rachel.
Well, I promise I'll try not to disappoint.
Okay.
No pressure.
33-10 win away to France, now ranked number 1 in the world. Can't get much better, can it?
Well, I think it probably can from if you saw the game. I think there's still plenty of opportunities and plenty of growth. And I think if you look also the amount of players who are out for England, it is a pretty exciting prospect about what else can come from this side. But aside from all of that, I think they'll be very pleased with going away to France and putting on a scoreline like that. It's pretty special. And to take themselves back to number 1, which is something they've been fighting for a while now. I would suspect it's been a pretty couple of happy days for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's the last time the side lost the game was in March 2018. As you mentioned, the number of players who aren't available, and you see the players who are performing now, do you think this is the best crop that they've had?
I definitely think, with what's happened with the Sevens programme, it's allowed for the young talent to come back into the 15 setup, and it's showed that England have historically had pretty good depth, but we've just not been able to see much of that talent because they've been off with Sevens duty. So I think it's incredible to see that they've come back and it's not taken them that much time to get back in, settle back into 15s. They've obviously been playing in the Allianz Premier 15s week in, week out for the last 4 rounds, which has given them some opportunities. But I think it's a really good place to be. I mean, Simon Middleton's going to have, tough decisions to make if all these players are available to him, if they all choose to do 15s. Again, we don't know what's kind of going to happen when it comes around to summer next year and what players may potentially want to do. But I think the youngsters that are coming through now, it is really inspiring. And it's great to see because there's been a big group of us that have kind of, been playing for England for a number of years, waiting for that next group to come through that was kind of us 10, 15 years ago, and now we're starting to see it. And I hate to say it, but they're better than what we were 10, 15 years ago. So, yeah, it's definitely good that the depth that England have.
Rachel, before we go on to discuss the World Cup draw, these are atypical times. It's not easy for the RFU. I think people give the RFU stick that they don't really deserve in this particular context. They're struggling as badly as everyone else is to try and keep themselves and, through extension, the game afloat. Now, what ideally, if they were able to finance all the women's programmes, I'm not sure they will be able to, what would you urge them to do? Would you keep the demarcation? Would you extend that, or what?
What would you keep them
between the
both?
7s and 15s? Would you ask them to make that again or not?
Personally, what I would do, I'd try and find a way to have them involved in both.
Yeah, I agree.
Why not have your best players playing in two of the biggest tournaments in our game and showcasing the game itself? I think it's been done before for a number of years. It's been managed really well in how players cross over. It still happens in places like New Zealand. You think of 2017, the players who came over from sevens, there was 4 or 5 of them that had played sevens all year round and then came back and played in the World Cup final. Sarah Henry, Kelly Brazier, Portia Woodman, Stacey Wacker. So I think it can be done if, hopefully, and I'd like to hope that the programmes might look to work together to get the best out of the players, but also the opportunity to go to the Olympics and be a medalist and go to the World Cup and become champions.
Rachel, we talk about the World Cup. The draw for the next year's World Cup is made on Friday. Do England go into that tournament as favourites? Obviously, they're number one in the world, but I mean, New Zealand are obviously very, very good as a team, but France and Canada provide a lot of strength as well, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I think, unfortunately, we're still in that stage where everybody looks at England and New Zealand being, that will be what the final is. And on current form, England and New Zealand will be the favourites going into that tournament. But you can't underestimate France, Canada, and even USA. That's another programme that if they could utilise some of their sevens players into their 15s, then, they could be a real threat at the World Cup. But as well as I do, that no team goes into World Cup thinking, that it's going to be easy, or that just because you're favourites, you're going to get to final stages. This World Cup is different. We obviously have quarterfinals and semi-finals, and just the fact that more knockout stages are there, it does bring different pressure, and that does different things to different players.
Club level, Rachel, you've had a perfect start to the season. A bonus point win over Sale over the weekend. Only yourselves and Sarries now remain unbeaten. Sarries traditionally have had the better of Quins, just about. Is it? Are you going to reverse it this year?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's our aim. Every season we sit down as a group, and our aim and ambition is to win the league. And we've come short a few years in a row, and we hope that this year that we've got a bit more of a balance of experience and young talent as well. We have been a really young side the last couple of years, so we think that we've kind of overcome those steps, and we've got Gerard Mullin now, new coach, that brings in a new dynamic and is trying to fix up on a few things. So we feel 5 games in, we're confident of where we are, but I think what Gerard is really kind of brought to home to all of us is that how much more potential we have to grow, and how many opportunities, even though we're 4 wins from 4 and bonus points in all of those, we are still missing a hell of a lot of opportunities, and we're still not at our potential yet. So I think with that excitement and the experience,
have you got the power
that we've learnt.
Have you got the power? Because of the Cleo twins and Marley and all these things, that's in the end, when I've seen it, that's what's been the deciding factor. Yeah,
look, I think our upfront pack is unbelievable powerful. We get double fold from them because they're very dynamic around the park. You've got Shauna Brown, Vic Cornborough. Vic Cornborough is one of the most outstanding and underestimated players, I think, out there. Amy Cocaine on centre front row, Abby Ward. I mean, the bulk of the start this weekend for England was from Harlequin. So I'm hoping, that this year we have a bit more of an edge to us. We've also got Kirsten Sommer coming back from USA that's joined us. We've got Anna Kaplis this year as well. So I think we have got plenty of power. I think it's just about being able to apply it on the day under pressure in those moments. And I think that's something that we've got to get better at throughout the season. Are we there yet? No, but we definitely have the players and the ability, and it's just about making sure that we build throughout this season to hopefully come those knockout stages, and we're in them, that we're able to hold on to that pressure and bring that power game.
Well, Rachel, it's great to speak to you. Thanks for your insights. I'm looking forward to seeing you down at Wimbledon. I'll be taking my daughter along to see how she gets along. Best of luck with the rest of the
season. Do a bit of coaching.
Yeah. Best of luck with the rest. No. What the things I can coach shouldn't be taught to young players. I'm sorry.
All right, we'll save that then.
Exactly. But it's great to speak to you, and thanks very much.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Cheers, Tom. Cheers, Brian. Bye.
Tom, Gallagher Premiership back this weekend. It's
just finished, isn't it?
Well, yeah, no. What can you say? It's all strange, isn't it? I don't know how anyone is supposed to predict who will do what and where.
Well, the biggest thing for me is how the players have recovered in between. You know, you can't get that mental break because you can't go anywhere. The physical break it's not really there, is it? So it'd be really
mind you, look, they did have
a
4 months, which they've never had. No, I don't think they'll ever get that again in their careers.
Well, it actually might lengthen some careers.
Yes.
I think that's a genuine statement. I think some of the players will really benefit from the time off. But it's just bonkers, isn't it? That it's back already. Good though.
Yes. I mean, did you see? I mean, it's going to be different. Saracens not there. Newcastle not played a competitive game for 253 days.
Yeah, you've got to feel for those guys, haven't you? Gained their promotion. They've just had to sit on their hands. They've had a couple of warm-up games against Ealing. Listen, I think, of course, Exeter are going to be up there the final stages of this season. That said, I think a lot of their players are going to be involved in various different international periods. I think Rob Baxter mentioned that a couple of weeks ago, didn't he, when he was on the show? I think the team that will be really licking their lips right now will be Wasps.
Wasps, yeah.
Because actually, the fact that it is a short down season or off season means they don't lose that much momentum from the last one. So they can just hit the ground running, get back into the groove, and with the likes of Jimmy Gopperth, Jacob Umaga still in and around that team, I think they're going to be in a really strong position.
Well, that's all we have time for this week on Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph. Huge thank you to my guest Tom May, and indeed to all our guests today. If you enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe and check out some of our previous ones and stay up to date on all things sport. You can head to telegraph.co.uk/contact, where listeners can get 30 days access to all the Telegraph's premium sports coverage completely free. I'll be back next week when we will be looking back on England's clash with Ireland, as well as the Scotland versus France game. Though for now, it's goodbye.
Full Contact, in association with Mitsubishi Motors. Drive your ambition.